through here. We're going to cover a few different topics. One is, first off, the business of cybercrime, right? Kind of set the stage for what is the business behind phishing attempts? Why are we getting these hacks? We'll then talk about some of the basics of network protection. So we'll talk a little bit about the technology that you should have in place. So we call it kind of the basic levels of security, and some you may or may not have in place. So it might be a good opportunity to take some notes and make sure you have those covered in your business, in your network. Again, I know we have various job functions attending today. Maybe you are the owner of a company, perhaps you're the IT manager, perhaps even CFO. Just take some notes, and kind of ask each other some checks and balances. Make sure you have these basics in your company in terms of hardware and software on your network. And then lastly, we'll talk about the Cybersecurity Awareness Program, something we think is huge. And there's different ways to accomplish this, but you can invest all you want in technology, but if at the end of the day your end user, right, who's actually using the device and interacting with emails and data, doesn't have the basic awareness or sometimes even advanced awareness, that could be the hole. And we call that the human firewall. That could be the hole that a hacker is looking for. So real quick, before we jump into that, probably about 50-50. Some of you know who we are, some of you may not. You may have attended an event that we spoke at. You may be on our, signed up for our email list and get some regular information from us. So if you don't, we're essentially, in large, an IT consulting firm. And we provide a lot of cloud-based solutions, a mixture of Microsoft, Citrix, and AWS for the most part, and really, really heavily focused on mobility and security, right? Can we mobilize our clients to work from anywhere, anytime, and can we do that in the most secure way? So those are really our focus, and today we have a pretty strong focus on the legal market, insurance market, and manufacturing are really our top three. So I know a lot of you fall within that same, in one of those verticals. So let's talk about the business of cybercrime. And this is, you may or may not already know this, and it's kind of fun to recap, but what are they really in this for? And it's, for some of you who haven't heard of this before, aren't too familiar with the, kind of the behind the scenes what's going on, it's pretty interesting what's going on in this market, so to speak. It's estimated that it's a $75 billion market, and there's no sign of decline. These companies, and when I say companies, primarily live overseas. A lot of them are based in Russia and in China, where it's not illegal to have a hacking, or cyber criminal type activity type business. And they target everybody from personal, you and me at home, to small, medium, to even large corporations, which most of the time on the news we hear about the large corporations, right? I mean, we'll hear that Sony had a hack, or a hospital had a hack, or a breach. But in reality, in our space, we work with the small and medium-sized businesses, anywhere from 20 to 50 employees all the way up to 1,000 employees. That's typically who we serve. And we see that there are threats every day, trying to attempt our clients. And so that's kind of a myth, is that these groups are really only going after the large businesses. That's changing. The large businesses are what we hear about, but it's really difficult for these hack groups to get through some of these levels of security, to where that small law firm, right, that thinks no one's really going after us, they're a much easier point of entry. And for the most part, our industry, the antivirus industry, IT providers, IT professionals, we're reactive, right? Hackers will create and succeed, a new type of strand of malware, for example, or phishing scheme, and then we see these, we recognize them, and we defend against them, right? So somebody on the market gets breached, and then we update our systems, worldwide, whether it's the antivirus, malware protection, firewall protection, UTM devices, to react to that threat. So it is very much a game of cat and mouse. And if you are a company that gets a newer strand of an attack, you may not have, the updates to your systems ready to block. So again, that's why it's so important for that human firewall, right, to recognize this doesn't look right. And we're going to talk more about that today. So more on the business. Obviously, the United States takes the biggest portion relative to other countries in terms of cybercrime. Well, we're a capitalist society. We have a lot of business going on, a lot of valuable data, and so we happen to be a big target. Ironically, China, takes 9%, but a lot of the hacking threats derive from there, which is pretty interesting. And then most of the other countries, take a much smaller piece of the pie. But our clients primarily are based in the U.S. We have some clients that do business overseas or have overseas offices. So that's us right there in that 23%. We are most likely to get, attacked. So here we can see, this is a pretty interesting graphic. It might be small on your screen, so I apologize. But really, when we dissect this, if we look on the left, it's talking about the total malware. It's no secret it's growing. You've probably seen a lot more attempts from phishing attempts than you have, 5 years ago. There's no secret there. But if we look at the graph from the right, the type of data breaches, this is very interesting because pretty much every other type, if we look at all the lines except the red, if we look at, data on the move, we look at, accidental email internet exposures, employee errors, physical theft, those are kind of on the downswing, right? Especially data on the move. That's where your typical hacking is going to try to, transact an email or, get a data from a connection and decrypt something, right? It's hard. It's not as easy. The easiest point of entry are the people. And so that's why you see that red line growing. Since 2007 to last year, it's gone up exponentially where everything else, all the other types of breaches have gone down. And that's because it's the easiest one and the most profitable, which we're going to find out for hacking groups, right? Let's stop trying to get, go against firewall and encryption and things a little bit more difficult from a technical side, and let's target the users, right? Maybe an unsuspecting user that doesn't know they shouldn't be clicking on something. I think that's pretty interesting. That kind of tells the tale of what's happening in the market. So phishing is really what we're going to focus on today because, well, as we saw in the last graph, that's primarily what's being used in terms of the types of data breaches. And really it's the use of social engineering to trick, right? To trick a user into thinking that it's okay to click something. It's okay to open a document. It's okay to enable a macro or open attachment. And no secret, again, email is pretty much that primary delivery method. It's the easy point of entry. They can get through spam filtering quite easily nowadays. And they target, again, as we call it, or we refer to as an industry, the human firewall. It's the people. It's the users. And whereas phishing used to be, we've all seen the emails, right? And believe it or not, I still see them. Clients still laugh and report about these. Everyone knows about, hey, I'm an inheritance. I've inherited money, in another country. I need you. I'm going to wire $6 million to you. Can you please deposit for me? That trick that we've all seen. That was the old days of phishing. The new days of phishing are really revolved around spoofing or spear phishing, where the information is really targeted to you or targeted to somebody in your company, where it makes you think that this is okay, that it's a valid email, right? How do they, if they've got this information about me, it must be safe. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Here's some example phishing attempts that we've actually seen on behalf of our clients. And there's many more I can talk about, but these are some that we thought were pretty clever. What are the odds that a user uses American Express, right? This can be both in your company or personally. There's a good chance that, if they send an email, there's going to be a large portion that have an American Express. And the email looks like it comes from American Express themselves. And generally the tactics that's used is they want to give you a sense of urgency or a sense that something's wrong, right? Something's not right. And you need to act and click on a link, open an attachment, and even nowadays call a number. Sometimes you may call a number that's in that email, and you think you're calling American Express, but you're really not, right? You're calling one of these hacking groups that's ready to extract information from you. And so if we look at this email, it looks legit. They have the American Express logos. They're telling us, our statement balance is $2,300. Now, odds are that's going to be incorrect, right? They don't know what your actual statement balance are if you are an American Express holder, but that may be, if you're not aware, that may be enough to get you to click on the Contact Us Here button or view recent activity, right? And what is this? This is wrong. That's not my correct balance. And you're not thinking enough. You click, and all of a sudden, they might direct you to a poison page that looks like American Express, and now they're going to have you download a piece of malware. Very easy once they get you to that point to have you keep clicking. Another common one, again, they're going to play to the masses. They're going to play on trends. Well, e-commerce business is growing more than ever. If you haven't ordered something from Amazon, I'd be surprised, right? We all have. So this would be a very common one, right? This comes from Amazon. It looks like it does. I'll clue you into a little key here at the end. It looks like it comes from Amazon. It says that I've ordered a router, right? Now maybe most likely I haven't just ordered a router, so I'm going to click and say, well, let me click on this order number. I didn't order this. What's going on? And so there's certain red flags that you'd obviously want to train a user. Now, most of you on this call, I know, are on the IT portion of your company. You may look at this and go, oh, it's obvious. Look at the top. It says Amazon orders at amazonpurchase.com. But how many of you confidently think that every one of your users would key on that right away and realize that that's not Amazon, right? That's somebody that purchased amazonpurchase.com and is spoofing emails from there. How many of you think that users would hover over that link and see where that's really going to? Is it really, when I hover over the order number, is it really going to send me to amazon.com, or is it going to send me somewhere else, right? Again, put yourself in that mindset. And we've been guilty of it too as an IT company. This is easy. We should be able to spot this, but we don't remember that a lot of the users in the company, they have different job roles. They haven't dealt with IT. They don't know these things. They may not have heard of it. So it's so important for them to be aware. Very similar here is a USPS delivery status failed, right? Again, they're trying to get something from us to invoke a reaction. Oh no, perhaps, and again, a lot of us think, oh, how often, I never ship anything here, so it's not going to work on me. But if you have 200 employees, there may be a good chance that a couple of them actually did send something, and now they get an email saying that it's failed. They're very likely to click that attachment to see, what happened. Is it their package? Or click on the link, perhaps, to learn more. But again, we look at the from address. It's postal-reporter. That's not USPS, right? Again, if we were to hover over that link, we'd notice that that's also not USPS, right? It's going to be sent them to some other poison page. Something else that we've noticed, when it comes to this topic of phishing attempts or attachments. A couple of years ago, it was easy to block because most malware or ransomware type phishing emails would send you an encrypted zip file, right? That was kind of the telltale sign. If an email attachment is an encrypted zip file, we know that this is a huge red flag, and we would tell users this because typically they'd have you unzip the file, it would have you put in a 4-digit code to decrypt it, and all of a sudden you deploy malware. Nowadays, they're using all sorts of documents. In this case, in this example, it's a Word document. It could be an Excel file. It could even be a PDF or a picture, right? And so when you open up, let's say, this Word document, another common one, which I don't have an example today, but is, they'll spoof internally, right? They will find out who the president of the company is and who the CFO is, and they'll spoof the president's email, right? Maybe get the domain name with one letter off, send it to the CFO and say, hey, I've got this, I have the latest financials. Can you go over these and make sure they're valid? I protected the document, so make sure you click enable macro so that you can view the data. Well, again, if that CFO isn't, thinking real quick, they haven't seen this before, they don't realize, they go, yeah, it looks, they don't pay attention, it looks like it came from my CEO, I'm going to open this Word document, I click enable macro, that's all the hacker needs now to deploy malware. And we all know the most common is the ransomware, right? Which I'm sure all of you are aware of. We can dig into that as well. So we've talked about phishing. Another one that we've seen that's sort of climbing up on the food chain in terms of cyber threats are public Wi-Fi. You are very likely to be working from, let's say, the Starbucks, right? And when you go to Starbucks during the week and during the day, and you look around, you probably see 4 or 5 business people with their laptops connected to the free Wi-Fi working, right? Now, hopefully, most of you use some sort of encrypted VPN or a Citrix type connection so that, even if someone is hacking that public Wi-Fi, they're just pretty much seeing, some encrypted keystrokes, so they're not going to see much. But most of the time, users aren't. They just open their laptop and start connecting away, start doing work, start working on emails, or maybe they go to sensitive sites. Well, if you haven't seen this, it's pretty interesting. I enable you to just Google pineapple Wi-Fi. Just Google that search keyword, and there's actually devices where, and this obviously would not be a company in China and Russia. It would be locally here. It might be a young thief, for lack of a better term, that's going to be in the parking lot or can be sitting in the Starbucks themselves with a pineapple Wi-Fi device in their bag, in their backpack, and they will essentially hijack that connection from your device to that free Wi-Fi, let's say at Starbucks. So you are actually connected to the Wi-Fi Starbucks, but in between, you've connected through their device. And essentially, they're very easily can keylog at the very minimum, or they can push fake installs. So one of the most popular one that we've actually seen is you're at a Starbucks, you open up, you connect to the free Wi-Fi, it looks legitimate, and all of a sudden during your Wi-Fi connection, during your session, you see a pop-up that says it's time to update your flash, right? And it looks legitimate. I mean, they have it down to a science. It looks like an Adobe Flash update. You just click on it, and seemingly nothing happens, right? You keep working, everything's fine, because they're smart enough not to. Their goal, and we're going to talk about this, their goal is not just to get to your laptop. Their goal is they know you're a business person. They want to get to your corporate network. That's where the real money is at. And so once they deploy their malware, which you enabled by updating that flash, which you thought was a flash update, they now can have full control of your device. Anything from using the webcam on your laptop, from turning it on and off, and encrypting if they want. But typically what they'll do is they'll wait until your device connects back to the corporate network. Once it connects back to the corporate network, they'll try to search out the corporate file server, which is typically where ransomware will attack, and encrypt all the data. And now all of a sudden, you know, the company is possibly at threat with a piece of malware. So this is actually happening today. It's happened to companies that we've worked with. They've had it happen, and so we've had to find ways of safeguarding. And so obviously there's technical tools, as I said, you know, using a proper VPN tunnel, preferably something like Citrix, you know, kind of putting their company into the cloud where knowing the data lives on the device. But also it's training the users, right, to be very careful, not to be opening sensitive data. Even you personally, right, if you go to a Starbucks and you happen to open your laptop and, or even on your cell phone, right, you connect to the free Wi-Fi and you log into your bank account. Key logging, they don't have to install anything. As long as they see your Wi-Fi connection, they'll be able to key log. So as you can tell, we can't stress enough how important it is, but these are things that perhaps even yourself, being in IT or being an owner of a company or a CFO, you may not have heard of before. But imagine, as we're talking about this in this webinar, think about your employees, right? Think about your coworkers. Have they ever heard of this? You know, do they understand this? And they should. So really, is corporate data safe? These are things, you know, that we're going to train on for users. And what site should you stay away from? We kind of talked about this a little bit, but you know, the best practice you could do is if you're on a public Wi-Fi, just avoid going to any sensitive site. Don't log into you know, an online portal to your bank, right? I mean, even things like Facebook, once they can get in there, you know, they can do some damage. And of course, you know, we alluded to this, you know, just a tip right here on the webinar, very basic. If you're ever connected to any free public Wi-Fi, whether it be at a Starbucks like we're talking about now, or at an airport, even a company that you know, any Wi-Fi that you didn't have to put a network key into, that's a private network key, don't install or download any updates. I mean, that's just a big red flag. So, and again, I know there's some questions rolling in. Feel free, just to remind you, you can go ahead and type in that chat box if you have any questions in the meantime. But we've covered the first part of this, which is the cyber business, right? What do they want? What is it really about? Well, there's no secret. It's the money, right? They're not doing it for fun. You know, sometimes we think in our minds a hacker is really, you know, it's a nerd in someone's basement that just has fun trying to get into, you know, a corporate network. Not really. And no one's doing it for fun or for pleasure. They're doing it for money. By far, the primary method is by ransom. I'll just talk about this real quick. I'm sure most of you have heard this by just, you know, in the industry or on the news. Ransomware has evolved. There's different types. It started with CryptoLocker. Now we're on CryptoWall. There's a dozen different variants, but essentially they primarily do the same thing. It's a piece of malware that will go through and encrypt all of your files and make them unreadable. And instead, you're presented with a message that essentially tells you you need to pay a ransom. Now it's through Bitcoin. It makes it very easy for them to collect a certain amount of money by a certain amount of time, and then they'll decrypt your data. And they will. You know, it's a business, so they will actually decrypt your data. In fact, the FBI, if you go into the FBI website when it comes to cybersecurity, they will recommend that if you cannot recover your data yourself, which we can talk about as well, you should pay the ransom. There really is no other way to go around it. And they've gotten a lot smarter, these criminals. In the early days, it would encrypt your files, but it would leave the original file name. So if you had 2 or 3 very important files and you were able to extract those, through backups and get them running, you could do that because you knew where they were, right? Now, it will literally scramble all your files where you don't know which one is which. It renames everything. So even if you had one very important document that you were able to decrypt, just to find it is going to be impossible. So that they got smarter there. The second is they put time limits. And basically what that means is in the first 48 hours, your ransom is X amount. If you go past that, the next 48 hours, it doubles. And after a certain point of time, they're just going to delete everything. So it really drives that sense of urgency to say, we need to either recover or we need to pay quickly. And that can get very costly, let alone the cost of the ransom, but reputation, downtime with your clients, downtime with your employees, the list goes on. And there's been various examples of companies in the media that this has happened to, but we can tell you working with small, medium businesses, it happens more often than you know about. It just doesn't hit the media. So that's my spiel on ransomware. I'm sure you already knew about it, but just to make sure everyone's on the same page. The other way they monetize is resale of data. So this will a lot of times be on the personal side, or they'll target HIPAA type, so obviously medical, healthcare, legal is huge because, well, any CPAs are another big one. Any business interacts and contains personal data, right? Social security numbers, credit card data, of course, that could be anybody if you're collecting payments, personal health information, client lists, all right? If they can get into the sales portion into CRMs and get client lists and emails, that's very easily resaleable on the second-hand market. So that's another way they'll make money off of it. Another way, which this one is not quite as harmful to you, but it's pretty interesting, is driving traffic to ads. So there's what's called affiliate programs in short, where you can, let's say that you built a page and you were selling a product. You were selling a men's razor, let's say, and you write a blog about how great the men's razor is, and anyone who clicks on an ad to go to that razor page, let's say, for example, to purchase the razor, you as an affiliate would get revenue and you get commission on. So there's these hacking groups that have gotten quite creative, where they will infect a bunch of computers, and they're not really the only thing you might notice is some slowness on your computer, but they're going to drive traffic from this network of computers, or a botnet, which we'll talk about in a second, to drive traffic to ads and to create artificial traffic there so that they get revenue from it. And they'll typically do that for a short period of time, and they move on to another ad, so that by the time that affiliate knows, hey, I'm paying a lot of money out to this particular group, they've already switched to the next. So pretty interesting, a little bit on the newer end. A lot of it's around what they call pay-per-click fraud that they're doing. So they're not really targeting you per se, they're just using your network to create traffic. So again, it all revolves around money. This story hit late last year. It's pretty interesting. FBI ends CryptoLocker. Well, it's true and it's not. So they ended CryptoLocker specifically, that strand, but they didn't end ransomware. Essentially what happens is they took control of what's called a botnet, which is similar to what I just explained, where they put malware or viruses on a huge network of computers. So and we see this often, if we deploy some security tools in a network, we'll notice that there's slowness being generated from 1 or 2 computers. Most likely they have a virus on it. And that virus is essentially controlling these PCs around the world to act as a network to deploy, in the last example we talked about, pay-per-click fraud, but they can actually deploy DDoS attacks, they can deploy ransomware, they can send phishing attempts so that they're untraceable, and they can do it at a mass amount, essentially. So the FBI was able to, this Game Over Zeus botnet, they were able to track down this botnet, and they shut down the computer networks, the botnet, that was sending out CryptoLocker specifically. But they didn't actually catch the group. In fact, Bokachev here, you see some pictures of, is still wanted. He actually has the highest ransom on him by the FBI for capture because he leads a pretty big ring of Russian cyber criminals. And now they've gone over to CryptoWall. There's all sorts of different variants, so they've just gotten more advanced. So again, this is a good example of a game of cat and mouse. Even the FBI can only trail behind. They actually had a very funny story on this, because once FBI seized CryptoLocker, or the botnet, they were able to get the decryption keys. So to tell you how much they're after money and how creative these cyber criminals are, listen to this one. FBI captures them. They get the decryption keys. They made them public. They actually put a site up that said, hey, if you have CryptoLocker, here are the keys. You can decrypt this for free. Well, the hacking group, still to make some extra money, were sending out CryptoLocker still, and then would say, hey, by the way, here's decryption keys for it, at a very discounted rate. For $20, here's the decryption keys. You can go and do it, just to get money from people who didn't know it was free on the FBI site. Right? They ran it for a while. I get a kick out of it. I think that's pretty funny. They'll do anything they can to make a dollar, literally. So, how do you protect your business? Hopefully you understand the types of threats. You understand the business behind it. It's a business, right? That's the thing you have to get in your mind. And how do we protect our companies? How do we protect our law firm? How do we protect our financial services firm, our insurance firm, our manufacturing firm from the outside threats? So the first step is a layered approach, right? By no means is this webinar trying to say, nothing else is important. You don't really need firewalls. You don't need antivirus. No, you absolutely need those. And you need to have layers, right? One is not enough. You can't just have antivirus but not malware protection or no firewall, right? And you can't have these layers without making sure they're managed and updated. Right? Far too often we'll come into a network and we'll see a firewall that has no more subscription, right? They haven't paid a renewed subscription in 2 years, hasn't been updated. Or antivirus that's kind of mismanaged. Maybe only 80% of the network has the antivirus. And of the 80%, most of the computers haven't been updated, right? They don't have the latest definitions. So, we won't go into this. We can have a whole webinar on just the technology behind it, but you need to make sure you have the basics. And here's a really short list of what we find to be, the essentials. Obviously, a proper firewall, a true business grade one, Fortinet, a SonicWall, Cisco, something that is business class, that's monitored and that's kept updated. Spam filtering, goes without saying. Make sure you have a decent spam filtering service that's going to take the majority of phishing attempts out of the equation, right? But they won't take them all. Right? That's just the reality. And of course, antivirus, right? Very basic. We want to make sure that servers, workstations, any device has antivirus on it, and again, has to be monitored, has to be kept updated. So some additional layers, and I'm sure all of you have firewalls and antivirus. I mean, that's pretty basic. But some additional layers that some of them are quite simple. They're just forgotten. Password policies. Do you have minimum requirements for your users? Do they have intervals to change? Are they forced to change them every 30, 60, 90 days? And I always tell clients this. There's always a company that says, well, it's a pain for users to use. Well, you're always going to have a scale of convenience, and on the other end of the scale is going to be security. And you have to pick where you're going to be. Obviously, you can't lock a network to the point where it's unusable. You have to be productive in your company. But you don't want to make it so convenient that you're not secure. Right, and that's a discussion you have to have as a management team, with different departments. Say, look, this is why we have these things in place. And what we found is by putting employees through cybersecurity training, they understand why you put these in place. If you don't educate the users, IT's putting these things in place and making my life harder. They don't really understand that it's a team effort. Right, there's a reason why we're doing this. Another additional layer, which is becoming more of a need, is the mobile device. We didn't talk too much about this, but there is definitely a trend in the last, I would say, 2 years where cyber criminals are targeting mobile devices. Now, most of that is on the personal end. They'll lock a device. They can claim a ransom for it. But as more and more devices enter the corporate world and corporate apps are entering on the device, we see a huge need to have mobile device control and to segregate what applications are business, what applications are for personal. One example I'll give you right now would be email, right? I'm guessing that if you're on this webinar in your IT, most of your users are just using the native active sync, right? They're using, let's say on an iPhone, they're using just the mail app, right? But there's things you don't think about, like can that user forward an email off to their personal? Can they take a screen capture of their email, right? Well, with mobile device control, you can get granular and say, well, maybe we use a secure app for email. And in that secure app, we're not going to allow copy and pasting. We're not going to allow screen captures, right, where they can take an image of a website. Now that may not be more internal data breaches, but it's things to keep in mind in terms of security. The third one is web content filtering. A lot of companies have very minimum in place, obviously, to keep off of inappropriate websites, and it might just be done at the firewall level, so it may be different depending on what office they're in. We recommend a good web content filtering that's device-based, right? That you can put on each individual device. You can put on their, let's say that you're using VDI, right? Cloud desktops, desktop as a service. You can put there, and not only are you going to keep off inappropriate websites, but you can keep off of unsecure websites. So if someone clicks on the phishing link that sends them to a poison page, well, hopefully the web content filtering as an additional layer will block them from getting to that site, as an example. And also, maybe for those of you who are more on the management side, any owners, CFOs, COOs on the call, you can also put some things in place like quotas. For example, I may not want my users to access Facebook more than 30 minutes per day. I still want to give some sort of flexibility. If you want to get on Facebook or you want to go shop, you can do that, but I'm only going to give each person 30 minutes. Once they hit 30 minutes, it blocks access to those sites. So kind of a neat security layer, but also productivity layer. Email encryption, secure file share. This one is so simple to set up, and I hate to say it, but we've walked into so many organizations that just don't have it. Law firms, health care facilities that aren't using email encryption when they send secure data. Mortgage title companies I've seen. I mean, there's literally people are sending out social security numbers, they're sending out personal finances, tax documents, and they're not encrypting it, or they're not sending that file securely, right? They're just literally putting an email, attach it, and send. And so that really is something simple that needs to be put in place and trained, with users on when they need to use that, or sometimes you can even set up to where it's automated. If it senses a social security number, it will just encrypt that. Very easy to set up. There's some really cool solutions out there for sending files as well. Even like setting up almost like the new evolution of FTP, right? You can set up a client portal. They can send and upload documents back and forth, and you can really have a lot of security around those documents. So very good layer. Backup and recovery, I mean, really on this slide, we should make this number one. I kind of call this the safety net. If all else fails, if all of your safety measures in terms of hardware and software fail, if your users fail, and you do get something like ransomware, this is your safety net. And I hope there's nobody on the call from Hollywood Presbyterian. I mean, there isn't that I know of, but that's something that was in the news a couple months ago. They got hit by ransomware, and they had to pay a $17,000 ransom, which the $17,000 in retrospect is nothing. What really hurt them is their reputation, their downtime. That cost them a lot more. But to us in the industry, I could not believe that they didn't have the proper backup and recovery. If you don't have a solid image-based snapshot backup with offsite replication, you need to have that yesterday. That should be priority. Again, we've done webinars just on backup. You need to have that in place. It needs to be tested, because if you do get ransomware, you're able to roll back your entire images of your servers, AD, file servers, SQL servers, the whole thing. You don't have to rebuild anything. Make sure it was before the point in time of encryption, which typically you can find in just a couple hours, and get yourself back up and running in business. And like nothing happened. And we've actually, I'm going to be upfront and transparent. It's happened to our clients. If any IT provider says our clients never get ransomware, that's just untrue. There's no way to be 100% proof. But we do have backup and recovery. We're able to get them back up and running. So that, again, as you can tell, we can't stress that enough. It should have been number one on this slide. And last for this presentation is multi-factor authentication. You probably have all used it personally. When you log into your bank from a new location, it'll send a text to your cell phone. Basically what that is saying, are you actually the person you are who's logging in, right? If somebody has compromised your username and password, well, if they don't have another form of authentication, they don't have your cell phone in hand, there's no way they're going to be able to log in. And more and more of our clients are using this to log into the devices every day. Again, a little bit of a learning curve for users, but ton more security. You wouldn't believe how many people write their username and passwords on a Post-it note on their desk. Janitor comes in, and it does happen, believe it or not. I see username and password, they sell that. right? They're going to try to log in. They give it to somebody else. So if you have multi-factor authentication, that password is not quite as important. So definitely something to look into. And these are all pretty simple to put in place. They're not that difficult. Okay, so now we'll get to sort of the meat here of it. And I apologize for taking 37 minutes to get through the introduction, but I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. We understand what the threats are. We understand what the basic layers of security should be, but this is the forgotten layer. 9 times out of 10, we'll find out that most employees aren't aware of the basics of cybersecurity in a company. It's just the reality. So how do you avoid? You can't avoid something if you don't know what it looks like, right? If your user has no clue what a phishing threat looks like, how are they going to know if it's safe to click on? Can they download the attachment? They have to know, right? So the question is, how do you train? How do you train your users if you want to get them to it? I mean, there's different methods. And so what I'm going to do on the screen here real quick is you're going to see a poll that asks, how do you currently train your company? Right? There's a couple different measures. Do you just use a handbook? Is it in your employee manual? Do you have an ad hoc meeting in the conference room, maybe a PowerPoint? Maybe you have a guest speaker. We've been hired to do this before, come in and tell our users what cybersecurity is about. Maybe you just send out emails. Or do you not have a formal training? So if you could just take a second, it should be popped up on your screen. If you can come back and tell us what you use in your organization, that'd be great. I'll leave that up for about 20 more seconds. Looks like we've got 70% of the people fill it out. I'm going to take a water break real quick. All right. Okay. Come on, there's a couple of you. We're still at 93%. So a couple of you, don't be afraid. Choose one of them. All right, I'll go ahead and close it. So looks like a good mix of almost half say we don't have a formal training. And again, that's nothing to really be ashamed about. I mean, that's just, let me go back to our slide here. That's common. About half of you don't have a formal training policy. That's common. It's just hasn't been thought of. It's kind of an afterthought. A couple of you say you have a policy or it's in your employee handbook, and that's not bad, but when's the last time your employees have actually read the employee handbook, right? It's not something they're going to read every month and be fresh on. A good portion of you, about 23%, say you have conference room meetings and PowerPoints, and that's good. It's good to do that, but again, ask yourself, was it effective? Did our users really retain it? Did we test them on it? And how often are you doing it? Is it something you just did last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Because the threats change, right? It's important to keep them up to date on what's happening out there and what's happening to your company. And then about 15% of you say you'll send out email warnings, which is good. That's a good complement. So let's say you have a handbook policy and maybe you do some meetings, and then if you see a current threat come in, definitely it's a good thing to email out to employees and say, hey, we saw this as an example happen to somebody in our company. Please be aware. Or hey, kind of like I urge you guys, send an email today. Hey, you know what? We're hearing about this security threats on public Wi-Fi. Pay attention, be safe. Here's some things not to do while you're out, on a free public Wi-Fi. So pretty standard. We've seen this. This is actually the first time we've done this in a webinar, but we've done this through seminars, through different associations, and we'll typically poll the audience, and they raise their hands, and we see about that same mix. About half say we don't have anything, but there's always a few people that never raise their hands at all, which I'm suspecting not anything either. So, and that's kind of what we see here. PowerPoint class in the conference room. Well, the reality is that it's pretty low impact. You have a few people that pay attention. That's not really interactive, and they just forget. And usually those are not done very actively, right? They might be done once and then never again followed up with. And so they're not quite as effective, right? They kind of lose their effectiveness. Reading material, I mean, this could be giving everyone a cybersecurity book, right? How do you know who's going to read it? It takes time, low participation. It kind of goes same in hand with the handbook. Same thing with emails. I mean, it's good, but is everyone even reading the emails? Are they taking it seriously? They know what that means, right? They're really talking about it, and how do you test them on it? So The method that we employ with our clients, and this started just with our clients internally, we just do it for everybody to get, it makes everybody's life easier, right? If our clients are less likely to get infected, of course they're happier, right? They don't have to deal with an issue, and we don't have to deal with recovering their data, right? So it works out for everybody. We treat our clients as if we're one big company, right? We are the IT department for our clients. Whether they have an internal IT department or not, we're an extension. So we think having what we call the 360 approach, right, where we train, we test, and we track. It's just a continuous. It doesn't stop. It's a part of their an employee's employment. Right? They just know that there's these threats out there, and I'm going to keep up to date on them, and we just keep it fresh in their mind. So how do we do that, right? I mean, that's the real question. So we start with online training courses. We have a platform. If many of you are in IT on this call, you've probably gotten online training for, let's say, a specific solution, or actually different departments have the same thing too. If you're on the financial side of your company, you probably have software training that maybe you've signed up for online. So we have online training courses that are self-paced, but you can give your users completion dates. It's kind of customizable for each company to do it a little bit differently. But each user can go online, and it's interactive, right? They literally watch videos, they take quizzes. I'll show you a screenshot of what it looks like. But the key is it's trackable, so that we, as the one administering it, or you, as a management of the company, can say, okay, which users are not taking the test? Which users have completed it? I can put a deadline. I can force a user to also, and this usually happens at the same time, read and agree to our security policy, right? Do you have an actual security policy that your employees read? Do they know things that they should or should not be doing? So it's a good time to have them take the training courses and then agree to the policies, make sure they read it, and then we take tests, right? Just test them and see how quizzes, how they're doing. So the nice thing about the training is it's chopped up into small chunks, and we have a general course which talks about many of the things we talked about in the webinar today, phishing and Wi-Fi, and we go into more depth about it so that everyone knows the basics. But then you may have a portion of your company that deals with PCI compliance. Maybe they deal with taking credit card information or social security information, and you may give those users that course. Maybe you have another group of users that's more on the road, right? They need to know more about Wi-Fi threats, or maybe another group of users that's more for HIPAA or compliance. And so you can give these users these tests and deploy them that way. So it's pretty effective, but it doesn't stop there, because if we just gave them online training and went about business, it's gonna help, but eventually they're gonna forget it, or the threats may change. So we have the online training as a continual basis. It's something that they should do at least once a year, and we actually update the videos and the quizzes to be more relevant to what's actually going on in the market. Right? We'll show them examples of what the emails look like, and they're going to change year to year. From there, the way we test is pretty unique. We'll actually do situational testing, and by that we mean we will send your users simulated phishing attacks from a large library. We'll actually we build them from real phishing attacks that we witness out in the industry, and so and we do them pretty, for lack of a better term, pretty sneakily. So one user may get a phishing attack that says, hey, your Netflix account needs to be paid. And another user may get, hey, someone friended you on Facebook. Another user may get a spoofed email from someone in your company with an attachment, right? So everyone's getting different emails, so they can't talk to each other, right? Because if you sent the same email at the same time to everybody, that's not going to be as effective. So we send different emails at different times to different people, right? So there's not really a rhythm they can see, but we can set overall, do you want this to happen once a month? Do you want it to happen every quarter? Do you want it to happen every week? And it's pretty interesting, because as time goes on, we then track that, and we're able to see and report who has finished the testing, who's clicking on these phishing links, and who needs additional training. And you'll see over a course of a few months that you're going to have a certain percentage of people that continually click on these links. They're not learning, so that's fine. We can identify those users, and we can approach them and say, look, here's the thing, you're still clicking on links, this could pose a potential threat, let's get you some more training, right? Until we can get that number as low as possible. It's known as a phish-prone percentage. How prone are your users to click on these links, right? Out of the box, it's very common to be in the 15 to 20%, which is huge. Right? If an actual hacking group launches an attack, there's a very high chance that someone's going to click on something, and that they can potentially get past your security. So our goal is to drive that number as low as possible, right? So this would be an example, is a screenshot of exactly what we were talking about, the dangers of Wi-Fi. So they have an online session. It's kind of, some of it's video-based, some of it is kind of looks almost like a PowerPoint. It's just a slide deck, but there's audio with it that actually, so they can listen, they can read at the same time, and they can have resources, documents that they can download and kind of refresh their memory on. But it's going to explain to them different topics, right? And it's, again, all self-paced, but you can track it and see who's finished each course. And there's no real way for them to cheat. You can't just keep hitting next, next, next. You actually have to go through it. So again, it takes time. It takes investment on your employees to do this, but it's no different than someone doing safety testing that works in a warehouse. It's something that you just have to do. Here's some examples of some phishing, reports. So here you would see, we can run and say, okay, based on a few month period, how has our phish-prone percentages dropped? So you can see at the beginning we had more clicks. As time went on, we had less and less clicks, down to the point where virtually very few people are clicking, very few people are opening attachments, and we can keep it, we can keep our human firewall updated, right? So it's kind of a funny analogy, but think about your actual firewall. You pay a subscription, you update it continuously, you make sure it's as strong as possible, right? It's up against the latest threats. Well, it's the same thing with your users. We call it the human firewall. We want to make sure they're updated. We want to make sure that they're subscribed to, right? Are they subscribed to our training? Are they updated by getting tested, right? And are they aware? Do they know about these things? So it's hugely important. In fact, we have some other things that are coming out down the pipe pretty soon, actually, where not only will we send out emails, but we can send out voicemails, right? We can send out messages to their phone, because that's actually something up and coming. Text messages, trying to get them to do the same thing, to give out personal information. So pretty interesting. We actually are testing one now where, believe it or not, this still happens. You leave a USB drive in your network, and we can actually track that USB drive and see who plugged it in the device, who opened a document, right? That's a big no-no we talk about in the training. If you find a USB drive, don't plug that into your computer, and especially don't open the documents or enable a macro, and those sort of things. But believe it or not, that is still a method that happens today at airports, hotels, coffee shops. They'll just leave USB drives with encrypted files on it that have malware, and hope that somebody plugs in a device and they get them. It works. So we call this our 360 security awareness program. Reason we call it 360, we kind of talked about this before, but we start with the baseline phishing test. So we'll run a simulated phishing campaign, and we're going to measure a starting point. Okay, where are your users at today? From there, we'll launch initial training, because we can get a good idea of what type of training is needed, and we'll introduce the employees to the basic cybersecurity. We're going to track them. We're going to train them online. From there, we'll start launching random simulated phishing attacks, and you get to decide. We'll decide together how often do we do that. We can keep it very short. We can keep it going for a while, and then we'll track the results. And of course, from there, we'll know who needs additional training and who needs to continue. Right? Pretty self-explanatory. So how to get started? You can contact us. You can call our number. I encourage you to go to our cybersecurity training website, and you'll get some information. You can literally fill out a form. And we start with a free awareness test. So no cost to you. We can actually deploy one of these simulated phishing attempts on your network. We'll work with you to set it up. And let's see how your employees react. Let's see, how high of a percentage there is, and if there's a need for training. And I'm pretty sure there would be once you go through it. So again, thank you for joining. We appreciate it. Please like us on Facebook, like us on LinkedIn. We like to get followers that way. It's great. And you can also reach out to me directly, to schedule a one-on-one consultation if you want to learn more about it. And stay tuned for our next webinar. Something that we like to do is bring you information that's valuable. So if you have any ideas, if there's a certain topic, maybe you want to learn more about backups, maybe you want to learn more about Citrix and Amazon and desktop as a service, there's tons of material that we can cover. Shoot me an email and give me a topic, and we can definitely put that into our plan and our schedule and put a webinar together for you. So again, thank you for your time. I know we had an hour set aside. We're about 8 minutes early, so I'm going to give that back to you, and we'll go ahead and conclude. Last but not least, once you close the webinar, you'll be presented with a quick survey that's going to ask how you liked the webinar, how good of a job I did. That'd be great. But more importantly, any topics, any recommendations, and if you are interested for a free assessment, simulated phishing attack on your own network, just go ahead and click that, and we'll go ahead and get back to you. Okay? Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.